students who need loans for university are being encouraged to get their applications in early so they don't miss the deadline. But figures seen by the BBC suggest that the amount they have to pay back could be double what they borrowed under the new fees system in England.
So how do the numbers stack up? In a moment, we'll be getting some advice from Moneybox's Paul Lewis. First, John Maguire has been to meet some potential students in London.
Meet the future. A doctor, a politician, a journalist and a fashion buyer. Well, that's if everything goes according to plan at university and if they can afford it. These students in Lambeth realise they'll be the first to pay the increased tuition fees at English universities, but are determined to fulfil their ambitions. Tosin plans to study medicine.
I wasn't really put off from going to university because, in my opinion, I kind of saw it as a lifelong investment and in some ways putting money into having a better future.
Tommy wants to study philosophy.
How much do you think your university studies will cost you ultimately?
About 7,000 a year, 30,000 in total.
So 30,000 in total?
Yes.
OK. How long do you think that'll take to pay off?
Not too long, maybe a year when I can leave.
A year?
Because I'm hoping to be rich.
Yeah.
So we entered Tommy's details into the BBC's student fees calculator, and the result, based on averages, Tommy would only be free from his debt not after a year, as he'd hoped, but after 25 years.
Do you sort of worry about carrying that debt or not?
Yeah, I don't want to have a debt that large at that kind of age. I want to be relaxing, you know, with a family. So, yeah, I don't really want that debt.
Okay.
But that's the price of the investment in your education. So I'm prepared to give that.
The director of the sixth form here says it can be difficult for teenagers to comprehend the long-term picture.
I think one of the important things for sixth formers is speaking to them about the value of money, because for some, £3,000 a lot of money, £9,000 is a lot of money, and they're not that sure what the difference is really. Obviously they know the difference is £6,000, but what it means in terms of budgeting and what it means in terms of their lives, that's the hard part for them.
Those arranging student loans realise these are untested waters.
The amount of time it takes a student to repay will depend on their earnings, because the more they earn, the higher the monthly repayment.
So, these sixth formers face their future with hope, with ambition, but also with financial uncertainty. John Maguire, BBC News, Lambeth.
Well, let's talk to Paul Lewis from Radio 4's Moneybox. One of the students there, Charlie was pointing out earlier, said he thinks he'll pay it off in a year. That's pretty unlikely, isn't it, for anybody who's taking out these kind of loans?
Yes, Tommy thought he might get through it in a year, and I think we think, oh, debt of about 30, I might be earning 30, I'll pay it off, without realising
that there's tax, there's mortgage,
That's right, and certainly the figures that we did a year ago for breakfast, and we showed for the first time that students who borrow, and then we thought it would typically be about 39,000, 40,000, I think it might be a bit more than that. By the time they'd come to the end of the 30-year period, because after 30 years the debt is written off, they wouldn't have paid the debt off, and they would have paid more than twice as much as they borrowed. So I think now that we've got 300,000–400,000 students committed to going, and I'm delighted they are all committed to going to university, they shouldn't worry about the debt. You know, don't worry that it's 30, 40, 50, 60 grand. Just think it's a graduate tax, because that will be how it's collected every time they get their paycheck. As soon as they earn more than £21,000, they will have an extra 9% of the amount above 21 taken off. So it's like a graduate tax. And what it means is that those students will be paying a marginal rate of tax of 41% from 21,000. So that's how they have to look at it. It's going to reduce the income they have to spend.
It's in a way, it's slightly at odds with all the messages we've been trying to, I say we, that are being pushed out at the moment about don't get into debt, don't take on. It is, I mean, and I know exactly the reasoning you're talking about, it makes perfect sense, but it is at odds with that, isn't it, to a degree?
It is, but don't forget, this isn't like any other debt. It's paid through taxation, through your pay slip. It doesn't affect your credit rating if you don't pay it or you find difficulties. It's just sitting there as an extra amount that you owe the government or society, if you like, because you've had the advantage of going to university and getting a degree. And I think that's how students have to think of it. And my advice really would be, don't think about other debt. I would say to students, concentrate on your studies, of course, get that good degree, but in your spare time, maybe take up a bit of work, a bit of part-time work, a bit of self-employment. First of all, you'll have more money and you won't have to borrow more on a credit card or, God forbid, a payday loan. And secondly, you'll show future employers that you're interested in working, and we know the competition for jobs out there, and the graduates, I think, who've worked during their course will have a better chance than the graduates who've not, who've done what I did, which was go to parties most of the time.
What an admission. You certainly enjoyed it. But the figures also tell a story, don't they? Because, you know, graduates do, from what you know, earn more in the end. Yes?
Well, that's what the government says. I mean, we know now that I think a quarter or a third of new graduates are actually getting jobs they don't need a degree for, and I think the job market is so tight. But ultimately, yes, all the figures show that someone who's got a degree earns more than someone who hasn't got a degree. Now, let's hope that's true and true in the future. So it is an investment, and I think that's what your guests, Remy and Yara, were saying. It's an investment in the future, and I think that is absolutely right, and that's how they should look on it.
Do you know, I went to parties and had a job, so it is all possible.
You're very, very good.
You do have to go to parties. You've got to live a bit as well.
Absolutely, yes. I do a little bit of part-time work.
See you later. Thank you very much. So coming up on Breakfast this morning,